Jumping back here into the action now, back on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, we are discussing something that I've seen over the last few days regarding the Philadelphia Eagles. And obviously, we saw, last week how the Eagles really dominated the Packers in their matchup. And again, it was one of the games where I never really felt you saw the first play, right? The Packers fumble, the Eagles score, and then I'm already thinking like like man, that was not how this was supposed to go, right? I thought this was going to be closer, and it just really never turned out to be like that. But the conversation really focused on Jalen Hurts and not really the fact that he was coming back from an injury. That was kind of brushed off a little bit after the first couple series, but after the game, it felt like a lot of people were just not satisfied with his performance, and this standard, I guess, of the passing game for some people was just not met in Jalen Hurts' last game. He threw for like 130 yards or something, and A.J. Brown was obviously at the forefront of that, where you see A.J. on the sideline with his book, and everybody. Well, one, it's a little bit strange because I've never seen that, but you see him on the sideline reading a book, and everyone's thinking right away like there's got to be something, right, that's bothering him, right? He's not involved enough, and he feels like he's frustrated, or there's something going on there, obviously, right? Because he didn't make too much of an impact. He only ended up having one reception, but they still ended up winning the game, and it never felt again like it was going to be close or anything like that. So people turn and question Jalen Hurts' ability and really the Eagles' passing game going forward, right? As if this is a big problem that we might have to worry about, right? If he does have to rely on the passing game, if we do have to come to a point where Jalen maybe has to go on a 2-minute drive and we have to win because of his arm, right? Not necessarily Saquon if we're down a touchdown or down 4 points or something like that, right? Then the question becomes, what do we do then? Or is there enough confidence in Jalen Hurts and his arm for people to believe that he could actually win a game throwing? And also, he's going to be playing in this upcoming game against Matthew Stafford. And then the differences also become a bit more evident, right? When you have Stafford, who would love to win a game throwing the ball like 40 times, 30 times, right? And he's just all about throwing, it feels like, especially in the playoffs. So seeing how they differ there, and maybe if the Rams are winning and Jalen Hurts, doesn't have like the same numbers as Matthew Stafford during the game, that also, becomes a point of people comparing the two, and right away, probably looking at Jalen as, he's not doing enough, or this passing game and Jalen Hurts' arm is what's going to end up costing the Eagles in some people's minds. And honestly, I just don't really see it like that, and I don't really see it as that big of a deal. Honestly, when they're winning games off of their run game, and that's clearly their identity. Of course, ideally, you want to be a balanced offense, right? Everybody wants to be a balanced offense, but everybody has like their thing that they're lenient towards, right? The run game, the pass game, if you will. Different variations in how you apply to the passing game and run game is also all varied. But yeah, I mean, I feel like just some people are very good at one thing, or very good at the other. I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially when we're talking about the teams at this stage, right? If we're talking about like a major concern about someone's pass game, then they wouldn't be here, I feel like. So I don't really see this issue with the Eagles passing game. I mean, I know Jalen's not really leading too many passing statistics, right, over the course of the regular season and things like that, which is something a lot of people look at. But I think people lose sight that it simply it's simply like a thing that just needs to be present, or it's simply like they just look at the stats, the passing yards, the touchdowns and things like that, and think that if someone's ranked like 15th or like 20th or something like that, that it means they're getting carried or something like that, or they're not pulling their weight. And I think that it's not a matter of fact that they're not doing what is not what it's what's necessary of them. I just feel like just because they're not doing it doesn't mean they're not capable of doing it, right? There's been a couple games where Jalen's thrown for over 260 yards and they've won. I think all of those games, I believe it was 3 or 4 where that's happened. And yeah, I mean, my biggest thing with him is just like they just decide not to really pass the ball that much, right? Because all these games, it just feels like they got a good grip on them. Why have Jalen throw for like 300 yards if you have the game under control with your running game, with an absolute just brick wall of an offensive line, right, that no one's going to get through? I feel like there's no reason to kind of force it, right, if you don't have to. And the stats may not look imposing and things like that, but it also doesn't mean that what Jalen is doing is insignificant. I don't want it to seem like they got Saquon and now he's doing all the work and Jalen's just kind of back there just giving him the ball and like kind of like here, like get us the win. I'm not going to do anything, right? He is still doing very, very, underrated things, I guess I would say, as a quarterback in his performances, right? I mean, you look at the game against the Packers and in these three categories, right? 10 throws of over 10 plus yards. In the second half, just kind of getting the statistics from the second half when the games, get a little bit tighter. And his stats against the blitz. These three categories Jalen Hurts did very well in, right? On throws of over 10 plus yards, he was 4 of 7, had a quarterback rating of 124.4 on those passes of 10 or more yards. Then in the second half, he was 7 of 8 with 92 yards. He averaged almost 12 yards per attempt, and he had a passer rating of 154 in the second half as well. And then when you brought pressure and when the Packers blitzed them in that game, he was 3 of 5 for 62 yards, 12 yards per attempt, and 143 passer rating as well. All of those numbers are very, very good, right? In terms of accuracy, quarterback rating, and the significance of the second half and yards of over 10 or more yards, right? All of those things matter, and it might not show out in the highlights that you might see after the game, but they do play their role in how this offense operates. And, Philadelphia is also 13-1 with Jalen essentially, playing like this, right? As soon as they found their identity with Saquon and really found a way to kind of take advantage of that, Jalen's been playing like this for really the majority from the bye week to the end of the regular season, and they're 13-1, and people are still, I think, trying to make a big deal about this passing game, like, oh, once the moment comes, like, that moment's going to come, and we're going to see, like, Jalen mess it up, because he's not necessarily dominating in the passing game so far. Again, just because you don't see it, just because they don't really do it that often, doesn't mean they're incapable of doing it, right? They could very well do it when you got wide receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, right? You can find the way to impact the game in the passing game when it's required. I just feel like it's not been required that often of them. And you look at these stats also from when they came back from their bye week to the end of the regular season and where Jalen Hurts stacks up in these categories, right? In terms of passes of over 10 or more yards, Jalen Hurts in that time period from the bye week again to the end of the regular season completed those passes 56% of the time for 942 yards, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. He had a quarterback rating of 122 in passes of 10 or more yards, which was third in the NFL. Then you look at his second half stats in all of these games from the bye week to the end of the regular season. And in second halves of games, he was completing passes at 69% of the time, 851 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a quarterback rating of 120 yards, which was second in the NFL in second halves alone. And then in moments when he was facing the blitz, again, same time period this season in the regular season, he was completing passes against the blitz at 64% of the time, 648 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a quarterback rating of 124.7, second in the NFL in that quarterback rating, and he's only had 2 giveaways since the bye week. Again, things that don't get headlines, things that you don't see on social media, like Jalen Hurts threw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, right? Impressive, but all these other things are situationally things that, all the great quarterbacks do too, but, other quarterbacks, like I guess Joe's the first one that jumps to mind, his numbers are a lot more impressive, right? And I think that just has to do with the circumstance of your team. They don't have a running back like Saquon, obviously, so he's got to be the focal point of everything. And I think it's funny when we were talking at the beginning of the season and really stressing the Eagles to find their identity and really get Saquon involved, right? Before the bye week. And then after the bye week, it's all about Saquon. He's the number one guy. They look dominant. They look like they found who they wanted to be. And now people, it feels like, got a problem with that, right? Like now they're doing it too much. What about your passing game? Is that still sharp? That's how I feel people are talking about it now. And isn't this why they brought Saquon in anyway, right? Isn't he showing how dominant and special of a player he is for being selected second in the draft, and still like people have a problem with him dominating games and being the number one guy? Like, I don't know what people expected to happen when you were going to put Saquon behind that offensive line, right? Like these numbers, this performance and this impact that he's had, we're seeing the kind of player that he should have been, ideally with the Giants if they ever, kind of gave him a little bit of help there. But with the Eagles and the kind of infrastructure they already had, you add a guy like that, I don't know what people were expecting, right? If he was going to come in and dominate like this, which is what they brought him in to do, especially after their collapse, you were going to take away from some of the other guys. And I don't think, again, it's a problem as long as they're winning games. If they were losing games and they were like 500 and things like that, then this argument, I think, would be more valid. But they're one of the best teams in the NFL, so I don't really see what the problem really ends up being. And, we had the same conversation almost ahead of that Steelers game, like I mentioned before. And, what happened? A.J. Brown went off, Devontae Smith went off, and Saquon only had 66 yards that day against the Steelers, but still they dominated that game through the air. So they're talented enough in the passing game to put up better numbers. And if that moment comes, I trust Jalen to make those throws if and when it becomes, needed in a game, right? The situation hasn't popped up, so they're running the ball because that's their identity. And again, they're able to do it. There's no problem with them doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the game against the Rams, which I did pick the Rams, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go out there and AJ has like close to 100. Devontae Smith has like 70 or 60 yards and like a touchdown or something like that. And Jalen throws for like 3 of them. That also wouldn't surprise me because you look at how this team's built, how the passing game could just benefit from the run game too. They're probably the most complete team left in this whole thing. So I'm not really worried about it. I think people are overblowing it at this point in time. And I feel like we're going to see a moment where Jalen's going to have to prove it in this game. And I'm confident in his abilities to do so. I don't think it should be a major problem. But, we'll see on Sunday, I guess. But that's just my feelings on it. But we got a couple more segments to get to on today's show. We're going to get to our power rankings now. After the break, we're going to rank the 8 remaining teams left in the playoffs. I'll give my reasons why for the power rankings and just kind of my explanation for why I have each team where I do. So we'll be right back with that. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.